I just walked out of Spider-Man Brand New Day and it was everything every Spider-Man fan has been waiting for their whole life. Man. Welcome back to Moody at the Movies. I'm your host, Mr. Moody, and if you've never been here before, this is the channel where I post my real honest reactions to movie, and I immediately need to come back here and talk to you guys about them. I rate every movie that I see on my 5-scale popcorn rating system, 5 being it's worth every kernel, and 1 being they burnt the popcorn. You'll get my rating for Spider-Man Brand New Day towards the end of this review. Now, for those of you that haven't seen the last Spider-Man film, let me catch you up a little bit on how we get to where we are in Brand New Day. In the previous Spider-Man film, Spider-Man No Way Home, Peter Parker had to make the biggest sacrifice of his life, and it was a very painful decision to make. So not just his secret identity as Peter Parker, as Spider-Man, but just Peter Parker in general, no one has any memory of who he is as a person at all. So that means Ned forgot him, MJ forgot him, even Doctor Strange himself forgot him. So no one on Earth knows who he is.
Oh, that sucks.
And Spider-Man Brand New Day picks up 4 years after that moment, and this is pretty much where the film begins with Spider-Man in complete and total isolation from the rest of the world. So we're 4 years in, and Peter has made a decision that he's going to be Spider-Man only, and he has no apartment worth talking about in this film, no social life, no relationships. He's just the Spider-Man of New York City. He's the Spider-Man that us fans have been asking for a long time from Marvel to deliver. The lonely, sad, depressed Spider-Man that just swings around New York. And that's what we've all been waiting for, and they finally were able to capitalize on it. This film was directed by Destin Cretton, and he makes you understand why Peter doesn't take the mask off majority of the film, because Peter Parker doesn't exist to anyone but himself. Spider-Man is the only identity Peter Parker has left, and he is burying himself in it. So 4 years of Peter Parker going into isolation and just being Spider-Man full on time has actually increased his arachnid DNA, which essentially just means Spider-Man, Peter Parker, he's becoming more spider than he is human. And that's something that Peter tries to avoid. His senses become just overwhelmed by things he's usually not bothered by. Once Peter realizes that the arachnid DNA is completely trying to take control over his body, he ends up passing out, and he himself in his sleep, he encases himself in this sort of web cocoon that he wakes up in the next morning. And a prominent thing that we notice is that this version of Peter Parker finally develops organic webbing.
Oh my god! Wow!
So there's really no longer any use for him to use his mechanical technology anymore for webbing. There's even a scene in this movie where Spider-Man tries to put his mechanical webbing back onto his suit, and it just pops right off, and Evie was telling him that it just wouldn't work, that you can't combine both organic webbing and mechanical webbing together. It's just not possible. So he ends up having to learn how to use his organic webbing. He's kind of forced to, essentially, at this point. Now Tom Holland Spider-Man has organic webbing, and I was pretty stoked about that, and I can't wait to see how they continue to develop his story of how he uses his organic webbing and what he can learn from it in the future Spider-Man films. Now let's just dive into the straight emotional factor of this film, which really touched me. Ned and MJ were absolutely outstanding. So MJ has completely moved on. She has a boyfriend. She and Ned both graduated MIT, and Peter lives right next door to her, and she doesn't know who she is. And later on in this movie, when they get to the party and Peter introduces himself to her, she has no idea who Peter Parker is at this point in the film. And when Peter shows up to this party that Ned and MJ are hosting in their own apartment, he shows up with flowers. And the reason why Peter shows up with flowers is because he brings flowers to his Aunt May's grave every time. So when Peter shows up with flowers, MJ questions why he has the flowers in his hand, and Peter's like, hey, they're for you. And MJ just continues to poke fun at Peter, calling him, hey, flower guy. And that's pretty much the whole bunt of the relationship at the start of this film. Seeing Peter and MJ next to each other for the first time since No Way Home, this close together, you can really see Peter trying to just navigate his emotions. And one of my favorite scenes of this film takes place at this party as well, and this is where Peter goes to the party at Ned's apartment and he watches MJ kiss her boyfriend, and you could just see it on Peter's face the moment that his heart just completely breaks, and you just see it on Tom Holland's face just completely through the mask in one of those practical suit shots the moment Peter Parker's heart breaks. And that scene transitions to Peter on the rooftop by himself, and he's alone. He's going through every memory he and MJ ever shared together. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this, but I felt that. I felt his pain. I felt his emotional despair in this moment. I felt heartbroken with them and for him in this moment. Tom Holland makes you feel what he's feeling as he's playing Peter Parker in Spider-Man Brand New Day. Another one of my favorite scenes from this movie is when Peter came over to save MJ from Jean Grey. So he ends up coming in as Spider-Man, and he pretty much tells MJ, hey, it's time to go, you're in danger. So MJ ends up believing him, and they end up swinging into the city of New York, and they end up on this rooftop, and it's late at night, it's dark, and this is where everything takes an emotional turn, where MJ ends up telling Peter that she remembers him. And in this moment, MJ starts telling Peter everything that she remembers, all the memories they had made together. And in this moment, MJ ends up putting both of her hands onto Peter's chest, and she lifts up his mask and takes it off. And she starts telling him about all the memories they shared together and how she finally remembers him. And then the two share a kiss, and Peter ended up kissing back as well. And in that moment afterwards, they ended up hugging. And then that's when the betrayal happened. It was never MJ, it was Jean Grey the whole time in MJ's body. And that's when you saw his arachnid levels just completely take over his whole body, and he wasn't Peter Parker himself anymore. And he grabbed MJ by the throat, ended up holding her over the ledge. He ended up throwing her off, and then he finally snapped back into reality and ended up jumping off to save her. And that's what led to Peter bringing MJ to the Punisher's base to protect her from Jean Grey from there on out. Now, Frank Castle and Peter Parker, they just shouldn't work together. They're just completely opposites in every single way. But as Spider-Man should, Peter still believes in people like Frank. Now, Frank Castle hasn't believed in people for a very long time, and every time Peter and Frank were on screen together, you can just tell that the two were butting heads in a way. Peter wanted to end up saving whoever was in danger and not physically harming them towards like death. As Frank, he just wanted it to be over quick. He just was like, bullet to the head, and then boom, you're out of here, problem solved.
Any lowlife, any maggot piece of shit that I put down, I did it because I liked it. Hell, I loved it.
But both of these guys just had me dying laughing every time they shared the screen together. Their comedic chemistry was just great. It was excellent, off the charts throughout the movie. Marvel did an excellent job with the comedy in this movie. They didn't overdo it, but they also did it in the right moment. So it never felt like anything was said out of place. It was just perfect timing. So props to Marvel for that. And then I really loved the specific moment where Frank says something to Peter about what he would do if he could have 1 second back with the people he lost. And for context, there's a scene in this movie where MJ and Peter are at Frank's base of operations, his house or whatever, and they're in his kitchen, and MJ ends up being nosy, and on the cabinet in Frank's kitchen, he has a picture of all of his family. And pretty much Frank is pretty much like he would do anything to go back in time, essentially, to make a different decision so he can have a different life and not live the life that he's living. He doesn't want to live this life of being a killer and being away from his family. And when MJ was snooping around, that made Frank very upset, and he pretty much basically said that he wishes he didn't have this life that he's living right now. And Marvel did a really great job with the Punisher in this movie, just giving us a little bit of everything about Frank Castle, and they just made me an even bigger fan of him after seeing this movie. Another cool part of this film that I really enjoyed was the Spider-Man and Hulk fight. I've always wanted to see these two fight on screen since growing up and being a fan of Spider-Man and both the Hulk. So it was really cool to finally be able to see that moment come to life. Spider-Man and the Hulk had their fight at the Roosevelt Island headquarters, and it was just a beauty to watch. I love Hulk just doing what Hulk does, just Hulk smash. Here, Spider-Man, he's trying to get his inhibitor device onto Jean Grey at this time, and Jean Grey's locked up into Metzger's office. She's just waiting there, trying to get inside of the vault that Metzger is currently in, while Spider-Man's trying to apprehend both the Hulk and Jean Grey. So Spider-Man brings this inhibitor that he's trying to put onto Jean Grey to suppress her powers. Spider-Man pretty much tries to get that inhibitor onto the Hulk now to suppress his powers because he's just too powerful. It just doesn't end up working, as the Hulk's skin is just too thick, so the inhibitor doesn't work on. Which then later on in this fight, Spider-Man ends up telling the Hulk that, hey, it's Peter, and that pretty much calms the Hulk down. And Spider-Man's able to apprehend him and web him up. And the Hulk's webbed up off the side of the building, and he's hanging on by a thread. he has all this concrete from the building weighing him down, and he eventually just ends up falling down, however many feet down, where law enforcement's able to apprehend him. The Punisher also ended up joining this fight as well, where he just started shooting bullets at the Hulk, and it didn't do anything, and it was just kind of funny seeing that he thought a bullet would actually stop him. But to Punisher's surprise, Jean Grey had other plans for him as she ends up possessing him and using him to try and get into the vault that Metzger is locked behind. Punisher ends up blowing the vault up and ends up shooting two of the guards that's right next to Metzger in the legs. And that's where Jean Grey and Metzger finally have their first confrontation in this film, where Peter ends up coming in and trying to control the situation. But Metzger, he pulls out pretty much what's like a tranquilizer dart, and he ends up shooting Jean Grey, and they end up capturing her, and he takes her into custody for further studies. Now, when Marvel announced Sadie Sink for this film, I was overly ecstatic. I loved her work in Stranger Things, and I was super excited to see her work on an even bigger project, which is with Marvel for Spider-Man Brand New Day. Obviously, going into this film, there was a bunch of rumors going around on the internet that she was going to be playing Jean Grey. So when the reveal of her being Jean Grey finally happened in the movie, I wasn't shocked or anything, but I was just super excited. I'm finally happy that we have Jean Grey in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I'm really looking forward to see how they use her in future Marvel projects. And just the concept of Jean Grey is enough for me to be invested into this character. She's mysterious, she's dangerous, she jumps through people's minds and bodies like it's nothing, and it's just such a sight to see. And I'm really excited to see the different type of rabbit holes they can go down with this character and how she's going to be used in different aspects of the MCU. And in Jean Grey's role for this movie, she's going through the city of New York and she's looking for something called VMAX, and Metzger has something to do with VMAX. And by trying to look for whatever VMAX is, she ends up jumping through all these people's mind and body, which leads up into Metzger tricking Spider-Man into hunting her down and bringing her in. But Jean Grey isn't the villain at all. She's just a girl looking for her sister, and her sister's name is Sarah, and Sarah, she was a mutant who was kidnapped by Bill Metzger and the Department of Damage Control. Metzger ran experiments on Sarah, just trying to map and replicate her mutant powers to use as weapons, and those experiments ended up killing Sarah. Sarah ended up using her last telepathic breath to send Jean one word, which was VMAX, which is why she's been so desperately on the hunt to figure out what VMAX is. Towards the end of this film, when Jean is captured and she's in her cells, she looks up and she finds a label on the air filtration system of the cell where her sister actually died in. And when she finds out that her sister was sacrificed in the same cell that she was in, and her sister's scrunchie was on the floor in the same cell that she was in as well, she pretty much loses it, and she releases all of her telepathic energy, and she just becomes more powerful, and she's enraged by this anger that they sacrificed her for whatever this VMAX was that she's been on the hunt for. And she just becomes really strong in this moment of this film, and her telepathic energy and powers, she doesn't have a limit on her jumps anymore. She can pretty much jump as far as she can and hop through as many people as she can without any limitations to herself. Now, a little bit about Metzger. He's the head of Department of Damage Control in the Marvel Comics, as he is in this movie as well. So Metzger, he's one of the most dangerous anti-mutant figures in the entire universe, and he led an organization called the Anti-Mutant Militia, where he had political ties and connections to the Sentinel program. Those are giant mutant hunting robots that you may have seen in previous X-Men films. And in the comics, his trajectory ends when Magneto ends up killing him in the MCU. And once Spider-Man figures out that Metzger is the bad guy, Jean Grey's holding him hostage in the cell that she was held hostage in at first, and Metzger ends up getting away because Spider-Man ends up taking a bullet from Punisher Sniper to protect Jean Grey. So I'm really expecting Metzger to pop up in the next Spider-Man film, and I'm really excited to see the development, the character arc that we're going to see from him. Now, something I want you guys to understand about Spider-Man Brand New Day as a piece of the larger Marvel universe, that on the surface, this is a Spider-Man movie, no doubt. This is Peter's stories, this is Peter's isolation, this is Peter's relationship, and they absolutely nail it completely. But underneath that surface, if we pull back a layer, this film is also the beginning of the X-Men era in the MCU. Metzger's the ideological villain of this era. Jean Grey's the first mutant confirmed in this era, and the Damage Control Organization is the government machinery that is going to make mutants' lives impossible for the foreseeable future. And Marvel did not just make a Spider-Man film, they laid the foundation for a decade of mutant storytelling in inside a Spider-Man film. And I just thought it was really impressive for Marvel to keep this a Spider-Man centric film, but also being able to lay the groundwork for the next phase of the MCU, which are the mutants. Now, I absolutely love this movie. I'm not going to tell you that it was flawless, because it's not, but I thought it was pretty dang near perfect. One thing that I can say is that the third act of this movie, it did kind of slow down for me. There's just a small stretch in this film where you can feel the momentum kind of dip a little bit, but they made up for that easily, so it was fine. At the end of Spider-Man Brand New Day, we're hit with one post-credit scene that definitely left me curious and asking questions. Ned's Spidey tracker comes up on a screen and it shows Spider-Man's location in Queens, New York, and then the signal, it starts to move. It moves east out of New York, and then it moves out of the United States, and then it moves off Earth entirely. The tracker ends up glitching, and then it finds Spider-Man again somewhere in deep space beyond the moon, and the screen just goes black with 4 words saying that Spider-Man will return. Now, it doesn't say where or when Spider-Man will return. It doesn't say Avengers Doomsday. It doesn't say Secret Wars. So I'm really curious to see when's the next time we are going to see Tom Holland Spider-Man back on a screen in front of us. I think for sure he'll be in Secret Wars, especially just with everything happening in the MCU right now with Secret Wars taking place on Battleworld. I definitely think this is hinting at Spider-Man being in that film for sure. Just with the signal going off Earth and into deep space, that's just the most logical prediction I can make on when's the next time we are going to see Spider-Man. I thought Spider-Man Brand New Day was absolutely fantastic. It definitely exceeded my expectations, the already high expectations I already had for it. I know everyone has their favorites in Toby and Andrew, but for me personally, Tom Holland has been able to get me invested more than both of those guys, and I'm really excited to see where he can bring this character next. You guys can let me know in the comments down below who's your favorite Spider-Man of all time, and give me a reason why as well. So Spider-Man Brand New Day, it gave me everything I wanted from a Tom Holland Spider-Man movie since the very first one. It gave me a sad, lonely, isolated, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man just swinging through the streets of New York. There was no Iron Man involved, no Doctor Strange, no Avengers, no training wheels, just Peter Parker in New York trying to be a hero while the weight of what he gave up is slowly destroying him from inside out. And I think Spider-Man Brand New Day is the best film out of all of Tom Holland's Spider-Man movies. Tom Holland is cemented. Destin Cretton is the director this character has always needed. The Punisher dynamic is everything. MJ and Ned hit every emotional thread and moment that this film was asking for. Jean Grey's introduction reframes the entire MCU going forward. And we're also left with the heartfelt ending of Ned saying Peter, which ends up being Ned finally realizing that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. With that being said, Spider-Man Brand New Day is going to get 5 popcorn buckets from me. It's absolutely worth every kernel, and I think it's the best movie of 2026 so far. I want you guys to drop your ratings in the comments. What did you think of Spider-Man Brand New Day? Am I rating it too high? Am I rating it too low? I mean, it can't be lower. It's 5 out of 5, right? I personally think Spider-Man Brand New Day cemented Tom Holland as the greatest Spider-Man of all time. That's gonna be it for my review on Spider-Man Brand New Day. Thank you guys so much for the love and support I've been getting the past recent weeks. If you love breakdowns like this, please subscribe and join us for the ride for the rest of 2026. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you at the movies.